Hi, this is Bishop Craig in Lansing, and this is Take One for the week of January 22nd. Peace be with you. I'm praying for lots of pastors these days, and I invite you to join me in those prayers. I continue to pray for Pastor Joan Herbon, who is hospitalized in Dearborn. I'm praying for Pastor Dana Hendershot, who is thankfully home from the hospital. And I'm very glad that Pastor David Sprang will be at Emmanuel in Mount Pleasant on Sunday the 29th, so that Pastor Dana can maybe go to church but not do church. I am praying for Pastor Roseanne Anderson, who is preparing for cataract surgery. I'm praying for Pastor Kirsten Sullivan, who is on a bit of a leave. She's away for a few weeks, that it is a renewing time. I'm praying for Pastor Kara Shaw, who has completed her service at St. Paul in Reed City and will be seeking a new call. And I'm praying for Pastor Robert Martin, who is transitioning from Florida and will be coming to us as the pastor of Christ in Michigan Center. The installation is February 5th. So I'm also remembering 5 other pastors that I cannot yet tell you about. So I invite you to join me in praying for these pastors and their congregations. If you have not done so in a while, this would be a good time to pray for your pastor, I bet. And Pastor David, Pastor Roseanne, the Synod staff, and I always welcome your prayers and are grateful for your prayers as we try to pray for and support pastors and congregations. So it's a week of prayer this week, I would say. I have on my webpage now, craigasatterley.com, I've got a link so I can keep track of my YouTube page, and I am grateful that we consistently have about 100 views watching these Take One videos. Thank you to the audience. I'm telling pastors and I'm telling myself we need to stop doing stuff that isn't working, so I've been keeping track of the videos to see if they have run their course, but we still have an audience, so we will keep going. I have a lot to tell you about today, and I know some of you check in to hear about the reading for Sunday, so let me do that first. The reading is the Beatitudes. It's probably Jesus' most famous teaching. It's from the Sermon on the Mount. And what I'm seeing new in this is that it follows immediately after the summary statement that Jesus taught in their synagogues, that Jesus proclaimed the good news of the kingdom, and that he cured every disease and every infirmity among the people. And so far, Jesus has only called 4 disciples. And this story follows immediately upon that. And so Jesus goes up the mountain. He's kind of a Moses figure. He's going to reinterpret the law. And when the disciples come to him, the text says, I'm thinking now maybe there's only 4 of them, that it's not all 12. And so what Jesus is saying to these 4 in a way is, I have called you, and here's what we are going to be about. It's kind of the mission statement. And the crowd who overhears, and they do overhear, will be the beneficiaries of Jesus and these disciples' ministry. So I find that interesting. I also find it interesting that they call Matthew the spiritualized gospel, as opposed to Luke, the more physical gospel, if you will, because Matthew says, blessed are the poor in spirit, and Luke says, blessed are the poor. And yet, as I think about it, these spiritual realities all have physical realities behind them. So usually the people who are most poor in spirit are the most poor. Those who mourn have experienced real loss. The meek are those who are kind of beat up and abused by the powerful, by the system. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness really want the system to work rightly, the way God would have things done. For the merciful, mercy is not a concept. They are merciful in their use of power and in their relationship with others. We go on. The peacemakers are those who work not through peace, through domination, kind of the worldly way of pursuing peace, but in their interactions they work for true peace. And the pure in heart, they see God because they see God in the other. And if you live this way, you will be persecuted for righteousness' sake. So as we prepare sermons on this reading, I think it's important to get beyond the kind of spiritual realities to the physical realities behind them. And then we see kind of how revolutionary, how much of a change the kingdom of heaven brings. And that Jesus, as I said in my sermon this week, Jesus is saying, yes, I am God with you, Emmanuel, God with us, but Jesus is also calling us to be with him, to be with God. It's a different way of being in the world. And that really is the call of baptism, isn't it? And it's the call when the church is at its best. And it's the call when we are at its best. So I'm hearing the good news that Jesus comes first, as I said in my sermon of today, to be with us, to call us to be with him, and to establish God's kingdom among us. And that is the good news, because as we watch the news, as we watch realities, we need God to establish God's kingdom among us. The other prayer I wanted to tell you about is that we are praying for the victims of the tornadoes in Georgia and Alabama, and on your behalf we were able to send a gift to the Southeastern Synod to help with that relief, so I thank you for that. So, 3 things I want to talk to you about today. First, it's really interesting. I've heard and I've received some concerns about some of the liturgical stuff going on in Sundays and seasons. And today I experienced a little bit of that myself in worship. The prayer confession said something like, for the sake of the world you love, forgive us, we confessed, or we asked. And that's almost true. Now, it could be a typo, but let's assume it's not. For the sake of the world, forgive us for the sake of the world you so love. Speaks to me of, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. We pray that for the sake of Jesus, please forgive us. Yes, Jesus is the reason we know that God so loves the world. So at this point in my life, in my ministry, I'm looking for explicit proclamations of Jesus. And I am sorry that one was missing from the confession in worship on January 22nd through Sundays and seasons. And I have heard these questions from people within our synod and concerns around the church. So my advice is look the Sundays and seasons liturgy over. Pastors, use your theological good sense. If you're without a pastor and you need some advice, reach out to Pastor David, Pastor Roseanne, and I. If it doesn't seem right to you, let's talk about it. The liturgies in the books, whether that's Evangelical Lutheran Worship or Lutheran Book of Worship or with One Voice, they've been pretty well vetted when they were put out, and I think they're on Sundays and seasons. So when all else fails, use the liturgy in the book. They're not innovative, but they might be more solid. 2, COVID. COVID continues to be real. I am back on antibiotics, steroids, and inhalers to try to get rid of the rasp and the infection in my lungs as a holdover from COVID. So I want to say to you all, COVID is real. Take COVID seriously. Don't think it's just a cold. If it is for you, you're lucky. On the other hand, if you are afraid of COVID and you're staying home from worship so you don't get sick, I support that. If you're streaming in from Arizona and Florida because you're away for the winter, I support that. But if you've become a little bit like me, where it's easier to, when you're not preaching, to sleep in and to get up and stay in your robe and jammies and to drink some coffee and to watch CBS This Morning, and just before church starts to flick on the computer, if that's where you're at, like me, then I think it's time we need to think about going back to church. And Lent might be a good time to do it, because there are 3 reasons I think we need to go back to church. 1, for Lutherans, you can't have church without a congregation. You can't have church without a congregation. Roman Catholics, the priest can stand and have Mass, and I kind of get that, but we need a congregation. If there's no congregation, we don't have church. So you're needed there. People miss you, they want to see you. If you're staying home, just stay home. Let's get off the couch. Second, I really think your pastor needs to see you. I think your pastor, if you've not been there a long time, misses you. People miss you, and people are wondering why you're not getting back and not knowing why we're not coming back. I put myself in the camp. They're making up all kinds of reasons. It must be the pastor's fault. So at the very least, let your pastor know if you haven't. Here's why I'm not back yet. But if it's just to stay on the couch, maybe it's time for you and I to go back to church. Because the third reason is, if we are going to become substantially or primarily an online worship church, then we do not need all these church buildings. We need people who can produce, direct, and edit video worship. So long term, I suspect, just my opinion, churches will close, they'll get larger because they will have video audiences. So we don't need all the buildings if people aren't coming to all the buildings. So if you care about your church and its future, and I'm hearing a lot of that these days, and you're not in the building, and you're not afraid of COVID, you're not away, it's just easier to stay in your jammies, it's time to come back to church. Join me. And Lent is a good time to do it. 3, getting lots of questions about Synod Assembly. So, I can tell you what I know. I'm going to the Comfort Inn in Mount Pleasant on Monday for a site visit. We put a plan together, which I'm thankful that the Synod Council approved, I think, in September. And then we've been needing to implement the plan. So we can't announce the plan till we know if it's going to work. So will there be workshops? Will there be display tables? Well, it depends on how much space we have. Will we have enough workshop spaces for everybody that wants to do workshops? And if we don't, who will decide who gets a workshop and who doesn't? If we don't have enough spaces, should we use rooms for workshop or display tables? These are the things we need to figure out. If we get a dozen resolutions that are on hot topics, we won't be having any workshops because we'll need the time for workshops to debate the dozen resolutions on hot topics. We just don't know yet. We're putting plans together. So our plan is, the Synod Council will meet to review how the plan is coming. I think it is February 11th, and it's to make the web page live on February 15th. So that is the plan. Now, the more time that I and we spend telling people we don't have the answers to your questions yet and getting kind of pushback, the less time we have to plan the assembly. It's like in the call process, I tell congregations, if we spend all our time on the phone with you talking about the call process or why the call process isn't working, that's time we're not talking to candidates. So I would ask your patience to let us get the work done. Here are the 3 things I will tell you about. It will be May 7 to 9, in person, in Mount Pleasant. 7 to 9 is Sunday to Tuesday. I know that there are people that want it Monday to Wednesday so that they do not have to drive on the day they preach. I know that there are people that want the assembly Wednesday to Friday so they have a day to regroup before they have to preach. I know that there is a resolution that says every other year it should be Sunday to Tuesday and then Thursday to Saturday. So more youth and young adults can come. I know all this. We went for the dates that were available and that did not conflict with Mother's Day, Memorial Day, the Festival of Homiletics, and if I remember correctly, Central Michigan University commencement. The second thing is that the theme of the assembly is it's about Jesus. So the assembly will be about Jesus, and everything that we do will be about Jesus. The only thing I'm not sure if it'll be about Jesus is David Sprang's jokes, because making Jesus jokes could be really bad. But everything will be about Jesus. So if you are planning on a workshop, figure out how does it tie into Jesus. Third thing, the web page, we hope to have something on the web page on February 15. So you need to be patient till February 15. So that's maybe Synod Assembly. So the last thing is to say about the way our staff works, just as a reminder. If you reach out to one of us and we give you an answer, and then you go to another one of us because you don't like the answer, or you're hoping for a different answer, or you're hoping one of us will leak more information. Our staff doesn't work that way. This staff, this current configuration of the staff, pretty much is hand in glove. So if you reach out to Chelsea and she tells you something and you say, well, I'll go to Ann, or I'll go to Rebecca, let's call Roseanne. So we all have talked to each other, like lots. And basically, it all ends up on my desk anyway. That's just the way it is right now, especially Synod Assembly. So save our time. If you get the answer, it's February 15th. That is the answer. And I expect now if you email us about Synod Assembly, they'll tell you it's February 15th and give you a link to this Take One video. So please understand that we all work together. Now, if you go to a Synod Council member, they may tell you what they remember or know this from the September or December meeting. But let's remember that that is a plan. And the plan still needs to be implemented, right? And so this could be their hunch, this could be their hope, this could be their memory, this could be what they think. But until the plan is implemented, we don't know. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is, if we're already worried about display tables for a Synod Assembly in May, I think we as a Synod have time and energy to take on more work. And that would take us back to the Beatitudes, wouldn't it? You know, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Maybe if we have time to worry about display tables in January for an assembly in May, we can do more to learn and share the story of Jesus. Because you will have opportunities at the assembly to learn to tell the story about Jesus. It's about Jesus. The church at this moment, what it means to be a congregation, our Synod Assembly. And so that's where we're heading. So I hope this is all helpful. And I understand the anxiety and that we want to latch on to stuff that is easy to deal with in these pretty unsettling times. I get it. Latch on to Jesus. Take up the cross. Say a prayer. Please. I'm Bishop Craig, and this is Take One. And may the peace of Christ be with you always.